my Creative Scoop, and I'm so excited to have you joining me for another monthly coloring tutorial for Neat and Tangled. This month I'm using this stamp set called Stay Cool, and I'm going to be sharing with you the different ways that you can color with your Copic markers. So let's get started. Alright, for this first image we are going to be doing the circular motion technique. So for each of these images I'm going to be using the same exact color combination, so that way you can really see the difference on the way that the color lays. So I'm going to be using E44, E43, E42, E41, and E40. So I'm going to start with my E40, and when you do the circular motion you're going to want to lay down some color first. So I'm just going to add color to the shadowed areas. So it's going to be mostly shadowed directly underneath the bear and underneath where she's sitting. And on the backs of the legs and underneath his face. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my E41 and I'm just going to add a little bit more color in those shadowed areas, but I'm not going to go out as far. And then let's go ahead and do the E42, the same thing, just building upon those layers of ink. Now let's start bringing that color out. So I'm going to go back with my E41 so I could blend out that E42, still doing that circular motion. And now with my E40 I'm going to do the exact same thing, but this time we're going to go ahead and fill in the rest of the bear. Okay, so now let's deepen up those shadows a little bit more. So I'm going to go back with my E43, still to those shadowed areas, and just make some circular motions defining those areas just a little bit more. Now we're going to go back with the E42 to blend it out. And then again with my E41. And now for that last color, that E44, just to define those shadows just a little bit more. I'm going to stay really close to the outline of the image so that way I'm not creating that large of an area using my E44. Alright, so now I'm going to skip between colors because we got a lot of ink down, so I don't want to go back through all the colors, so I'm going to skip between. So instead of using the E43, let's get out the E42 and blend out that E44 just a little bit, just to soften up that edge. And I'm going to skip my E41 and go straight to my E40 to finish blending out those shades. Soften it up a little so there's no harsh lines between each color. All right, so there you have it. You have the blending your Copic markers using the circular motion. Now let's go ahead and do the flicking technique. Okay, so using the exact same color combination, the E44 all the way down to E40, I'm going to start with my E44. And I'm going to add just a little bit of color into those shadowed areas. So it's still going to be the same as it was in that first image. I'm just going to do this little bit of flick right next to the actual outline of the stamp. And now I'm going to take my E43 and just flick the E44 out, coming out just a little bit further, and that's what we're going to do with each color, with each new lighter shade. We're just going to flick going out, and we're going to start filling in the bear little by little. And now with the E42. Now if you've watched any of my videos or taken any of my online classes, you'll notice a lot what I'll say doing a heavy flick. And that's when I really push that color out by pressing down on my nib and flicking up really hard and really pushing it out even further. So notice I'm really close to the image, the outline still, but by doing that heavy flick, I'm bringing out that color even more. And there's a nice transition between the colors and the white paper. And now with my E41, doing the same thing, doing that heavy flick, so there's just a little bit of white showing now. And now we're going to go ahead and take our E40 and start right where we kind of left off with that E41, because we don't want to go into the dark, because then that's just going to pull away all that shadowing that we just did. So we're just going to lightly go over the uncolored areas and fill in the rest of our image. And then I always like to go back and add a second coat. So I'm going to go back with my E44 and I'll go down the color, that whole thing, skipping one just like how we did in that first one. So that way I'm adding those shadows back in there. But then instead of adding so much more colors, so that way we still keep our dark to light contrast and we could still keep the really light areas on the bear. If I were to go back and add a full another coat of everything, I'm just adding that much more ink on the paper, which is darkening up our image, and I like that dark to light gradient when I'm coloring. So instead of using the E43, I'm going to go ahead and go back with my E42 to blend out this E44. And now with my E40, go ahead and do that heavy flick, softening up all those edges and adding that one extra layer of the E40 in the highlighted areas. Alright, so there we go. We have our bear colored with our flicking technique, and let's go ahead and do the dotted technique. Okay, so using the same exact color combination, I'm going to go ahead and start doing the little dotted technique so that way we can have a little bit more texture to our image. I'm going to start with my E44 and still in those same exact places, the shadows don't change. I'm going to go ahead and just dot in the areas that are going to be shadowed. And notice how closer to the outline of the image, I'm making my dots a little bit closer together, and as I'm moving out, I'm making them a little bit more spread out. So it still kind of goes from dark and then spreading out, it gets a little bit lighter. Alright, now with my E43 doing the same exact thing, we're going to go back over with the E44 with the E43, because the way we're going to get this to blend is by adding a little bit of the E43 in between all of these little white areas from the E44. So that way the color lays down in between and it will start to blend the ink together. And then you still want to come out just a little bit more, spreading out those dots. Alright, so now we are ready to move on to E42. So again, I'm going a little bit more solid, closer to the E43, and then coming out just a little bit more. And since we are going to keep those lighter areas with the next two colors, we're really going to start coming in a little bit more with that E42, because the E40 and the E41 are very close in shades. And now with my E41, so there's just a little bit of area left over for my E40. You want to almost fill everything in, but you still want those textures to be there, so you still want to go back with that even lighter color in between all of the E41. It will stay that much lighter and still have all that nice texture that we just created. So now I'm going to take my E40 and really focus on those lighter areas, still dotting, still going back over some of that E42, just blending all of those together by giving a little push on the nib of your marker. Alright, so now I'm going to go back and do the exact same thing. We're going to add a little bit more shadows using the E44. This time, because it's really textured, I am going to come out just a little bit more with each lighter color into the like the center parts of the lighter areas, just to give it a little bit more texture. Because if there's so much fur and he's really furry, the fur is going to leave a little bit of shadows here and there on throughout his body. So just to have it blended out a little bit more, that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to skip, so let's go with E42, adding the dots, and also going back with the E42 and just giving it a little bit more of that textured look throughout the body, and also blending out that E44 just a little bit. And then skip the E41, and we're going to go with E40. All right, so there we go. We're all finished with our dotted technique, and we have our flicking technique and our circular blending technique. Which one is your favorite? I really prefer doing the flicking, and I love doing the dotting, and a lot of times I will combine these two for a little bit of texture. I really feel that when you do that circular motion, depending on the style of coloring that you prefer, you use way more ink than you do for the flicking and even the dotted. So you can see that the bear on the back of here is really saturated, and then the outer part is more saturated, but not the center on the flicking, and then that one is a little bit throughout the whole image. So it really is all a preference. These markers are seriously amazing, and there's so many different ways that you could use them, and there really there's no wrong or right way to use them. I believe that art is art, and it's however you feel comfortable and whatever that you prefer. So I hope you enjoyed this month's video. I will see you again next month.